Today is Thursday, May 1st, 2025. My name is Judy Herrera, and I'm in Camarillo, California. It is my honor and pleasure to interview Philip Wilson on behalf of the Conejo Valley chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution and Colonial Dames, 17th Century, for the Veterans History Project with the Library of Congress. This interview is being recorded by Ed Lynch from Advana Videography and contains the reflections and memories of Philip during his time in the Navy. This is his story.
I did go to 7th and 8th grade here in Oxnard. The school's no longer there. It was, I think it was George Washington School or something. It was on First between C and A. C Street and A Street was on the north. And took a normal curriculum, nothing out of the ordinary. I was like any other young man. I had a paper route. I had 2 different paper routes at different times. Delivered papers in Oxnard. And
Okay, slow up because we're not.
Oh yeah, you're live.
We are?
Yeah.
I'm not going to go back and do my spiel?
Yeah.
I am or not?
Sure.
Oh, okay. Okay, so let's go back and start. We're going to start over, and he's videoing, so.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to do the Philip, you were born in Tulare. Okay.
Okay.
Philip, you were born in 1938 in Tulare, California. After a brief stay in Missouri, your mom moved the family back to the San Joaquin Valley town of Lindsay. You attended school there through the beginning of 7th grade, and then your adopted father, H.C. Wilson, moved the family down to Ventura County in Southern California. Do you want to pick up your story there?
Okay. That was in January of 1950, and I finished the 7th grade and 8th grade there at, I believe the name of the school was George Washington Secondary School. I was one of the last classes to use the auditorium at the old Oxnard Union High School on 5th Street there. And the earthquake happened in the summer of '52, and I started there in September of '52, and the earthquake damaged the school so that the auditorium was no longer usable. Oh. And since that time, they have built a couple of new, 3 new high schools there. Oh. But all of the, of course, like other guys, shop was on the requirement. I did take a college prep course in high school. By my own estimation, I was not a scholar student, but I took all the English and everything to be prepared for college work.
What were some of the things you did in high school?
Excuse me?
What were some of the things that you did in high school?
Well,
Okay, pause.
Second. The glass over here, please. The glass.
Yeah, move that whole thing over. It's right in his way with the camera.
What's going on?
Just move the glass. Just move everything over here, sir.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, that's okay.
Thank you. It's just sitting on.
But no, I started out taking a normal physical education class, transferred from that. I was small, okay? I was not, I was only like 5'7", and I may have weighed 120 pounds soaking wet.
Wow.
And so as far as sports in high school, they were pretty much beyond my reach because of my size. Oxnard was a 4A school at that time even, and they didn't have room for a little guy.
Oh.
So I started in PE, and then partway through that I transferred over to the California Cadet Corps, which they had at Oxnard High, and that was started my marching career. I done that for the rest of that year, and then in my sophomore year I went into gymnastics and spent the next 3 years in gymnastics there. We put on simple exhibitions for service clubs primarily. We didn't have a strong team. We didn't go to any meets for NCAA or anything like that. There was 8 of us, 10 of us, something like that was in the class, and the highlight of the class was we had one fellow that was, he was a diver actually, but his skills in doing twists and somersaults and what have you was very good, because he'd done that in his diving. Yeah. But he was really the star of the class, and I wasn't too concerned about it, to tell you the truth. I was more concerned about working and growing food for the family, and because at that time when we moved to Oxnard, we lived in the it was military housing.
Oh, yeah.
Well, during the Second World War, they had pre-flight training and preliminary flight training at Oxnard Airport, and the drill field and the housing was in Quonset huts across from the high school. And after the war, they needed housing, so they converted that to servicemen's housing that had served in the war, and they it was limited because the program was never designed to be a continuing type thing. And they took a whole Quonset and they put a partition in the middle, and you had on each end of the Quonset you had a 2-bedroom apartment.
Oh, okay.
And they were only accessible by retired military or ex-military personnel that come back. So we lived there. My dad was in the Army, of course. He had enlisted, couldn't find work in California, so he enlisted in the Army in 1939. And he was actually trained as an artilleryman, and he served, when war broke out, he was stationed at the armory in Pasadena.
Oh, wow.
They had an artillery unit there, and he said they actually fired a couple of rounds into the air because they thought all planes were grounded on December the 7th. So, but they did get off a couple of shots, he said. Don't know whether they hit anything, probably not. But he served all during the war, of course, and got out in September of '45. He was one of the early outs.
So then you graduate. So you're going to graduate from Oxnard High School in June of '56.
Correct.
And then what were your plans? What did you do after that?
Well, I signed up for. I needed a college trigonometry and a college algebra course to start my first year. And so that summer session I took at Ventura College, I took college algebra and college trig and completed those subjects that summer. So I was ready to go. Now I said I was not a stellar student, and by the reality of that was I had to go through remedial English.
That's not a problem. If you're good in math, you're usually not good in English.
And I did that, and then, but I maintained my, I was pre-math, and I continued with that education. Took German for a language. I'll confess I don't remember a whole lot of it, but that was 60 years ago or so,
Right.
70 years ago.
Oh, gosh.
But in 1958, I got sick and had to go in the hospital, have my tonsils and adenoids out, blah, blah, blah. And wound up, by the time I got out of the hospital and got back, it was too late to drop my courses. And so I wound up with F's in those courses, and that was going to affect my grade point average. And so I made a decision there to join the Navy. And my dad and I had a pact. He says that I could live in his house and eat at his table as long as I was in school. Once I was no longer in school,
Oops.
it was perfectly legal for me to be out on the street if I wished, because home was no longer available. And I said, thank you very much, and I agreed to that. And so I went in the Navy, and first I tried to get in the Air Force, and I wanted to fly. And my eyes were not adequate for flying, so the next option that came up was the Navy. And the nuclear-powered Navy was just coming out. The Nautilus was, what, a year old at that time. This was in 58. So I enlisted under the nuclear power program,
And so where did they send you? Where did the Navy
Excuse
send you?
me?
Where did the Navy send you for boot camp? Where'd you go from
I
there?
went to boot camp in San Diego on Rosecrans there at the Navy Recruit Depot. And I spent we spent, we went there first, but this was in 58, August of 58, and they needed people to stencil uniforms and what have you, so our company was selected to work for, I don't know, it was either 2 or 3 weeks we spent in the stenciling shop, and as all of the recruits came through, we stenciled all the uniforms for them. And then finally we got our own uniforms.
Oh, gosh.
But
So what was boot camp like? What did they have you do?
Basic military requirements, how to, everything from rank to marching to parading to exercises, multiple exercise classes, and they fed us well. That was, everybody says the food when they went in the Navy was terrible. I had never seen that much food. I was in heaven. And I went in, I weighed, I don't know, I think I weighed 140 pounds when I went in the Navy. And I got out of boot camp, I weighed 175 pounds.
Oh, my goodness.
And
Even with all the marching and everything?
even
huh?
with all
wow.
the You walked everywhere. The only place we didn't walk to was whenever we went to the rifle range.
Oh,
And that was out at Camp Elliott in San Diego. It's out, well, it's in the middle of San Diego now. It's 20 miles out there, but they loaded us up in a cattle car, what they called a cattle car, and that's just about what it was. It was a semi-trailer that they had put benches along the sides, and it had air would flow through the thing, and they drove us out there, and we qualified with M1 rifles,
okay.
which was the issue of at that time. A couple of years later, that's when they went to the M15,
Oh, okay.
M16.
16, yeah.
But our qualifying was with 45s caliber pistols and M16 rifles.
And were you able to keep in touch with family, or did you have a girlfriend at this point? Not yet?
Well, I had a young lady that I was writing to, yes. I don't know that you could consider her a girlfriend. It was a young lady I'd met, and she wrote to me, and I wrote back, and so we corresponded,
Okay.
via the mail,
Right.
because I wasn't going anywhere. You were, at that time, there was only one, 6-hour, 7-hour liberty that you were given in the 4 months you were there.
Wow.
And so you didn't have much of a social life. It was all military.
Okay.
But no, we wrote letters back and forth to family and friends, including parents, and because moms like to hear from you.
They sure do.
Like I say, I really enjoyed the food, and I gained a lot of weight at it. But
So what did the Navy decide you were going to be good at? What did they do with you next?
I qualified for most all the schools. I scored rather high on the basic battery of tests, which they give you during boot camp also. I wasn't a superstar, but I qualified for most everything, and they needed communications technicians at that time, and so I went to Interior Communications School, and what that is aboard ship. You take care of the telephone system, the PA system, also the sound-powered phone system, the indicators, all the indicators on the bridge and stuff, the remote indicators, and the plotting and navigational equipment that the quartermasters use and what have you. So they
Sent you to school.
tell us where we're at on the ocean.
Okay.
That was a 14 or 15-week school there in San Diego. So I went from boot camp over here one week to over here the next week in school. Well, I think there was a week off because the next class wasn't fully formed yet.
Okay.
But it was a week or two off that we had. But completed that training and scored well there. I don't know how well I scored. It's on my 214.
Oh, okay.
But went from there to part of the nuclear power program at that time was that you were going to be on submarines. So as soon as I finished A school, they shipped me to New London, Connecticut for submarine school. And that was another 12 weeks, 14 weeks of school. And you learned all the systems that operate on the sub. And the majority of the systems on there are fully redundant. You have running down, you'll have electrical running down the port side of the ship, but also you have electrical running down the starboard side of the ship. If the port side gets damaged, you can switch over to the other side and keep going. The same, you have like air compressors, that's how you get up from being submerged is with compressed air. So you have not only one air compressor, you have two. And on those particular ships, I've forgotten right now what the air pressure was that we used. It was something like 600 pounds air pressure. But that was enough to force the water out of the tank so that you could surface. Okay. And electric boat done a very good job of that. And so then you go from submarine school, where you learn about all the systems. You're assigned to a sub someplace, and in my particular instance, they sent me to the U.S.S. Blackfin in Hawaii.
Oh, nice.
Pearl Harbor is where it was home ported at that time. And that's where you get to go through and find out where all the valves are at. And you say, well, why is that important? Because if you have, a lot of the main valves have remote activation. They'll have air pressure or electrical operation of the valve. However, if that system fails, if the primary system fails, they have a manual system where you go to the valve and operate it. That's the importance of qualifying on a submarine, knowing where the valves are at and how to operate the mechanisms so that if you need to get up from under the sea, why, you can go over there and do it. If you have a casualty, you know where all the vents and the various operating procedures for the ventilation, for the any electrical that might be affected, you have to know where it's at. So,
Okay.
and know how to operate the valves and or circuit breakers, or and also hopefully you know what you're shutting down whenever you open that circuit breaker.
Right.
And that's what they call the qualifications of the ship. Now, usually for an enlisted man, that may take usually 4 to 6 months, because you're doing this during the working day. You have have assigned things to do, and you go do them. And during your off hours is when you do your qualifications. And then one of the senior men in the compartment, or there are different petty officers that are designated as qualification petty officers for all the systems, and you have to get checked off by that individual. And so that takes a while.
I could say.
But,
So how fun was Pearl Harbor? You went from Connecticut to Pearl Harbor. It must have been.
well, the first indications was that I went out there and we were in our dress blues, and of course you get off the airplane, which lands at Hickam Air Force Base. Well, they call it Joint Base Pearl Harbor now, which is, they combined Hickam and Pearl Harbor Base. And first thing you notice is that it's probably 75 to 80 degrees with the same amount of humidity, and you're in wool uniforms.
Uh-oh.
And so that doesn't work too well.
No.
But they take you over to the submarine base, Now, there's a transport there that'll take you over to the base at Pearl Harbor itself, and the submarine base is a part of that.
Okay.
And they have a barracks there where you can store your stuff, and temporarily until you get aboard ship. Depends on what the ship is doing as to what all you're going to be doing. But you get there, you put they give you a locker and a rack and a bed, and you don't necessarily unload your uniforms and all, but you put it in the general area, and then you can go eat. And you walk into the mess hall there. At that time, that was the #1 mess hall in the Navy. You had every kind of fruit that you could ever think that you'd ever want to eat, and a lot of them you didn't even know what they were.
Yeah.
A lot of pineapple. And same thing with the salads. There was just whole lineups of salads. Everything you might want on a salad is there. There's steak. There's, if they have steak on the menu that day, or ham. And I'm not talking about little chunks of ham. There's big hams. And they're cooked well. But,
So how long were you at Pearl?
I was only there, I maintained a rack up there in that area the whole year I was in Pearl. That was an alternate place for me to go. You could not have any civilian clothes aboard the boat. Only officers could have civilian clothes aboard the boat. And so any civilian clothes you had was in the locker up there.
Okay.
But once you went aboard the boat, then
That's it.
I can't think of there was one time when the boat got underway without me, and I was doing something at the shop over on the base there or something for the boat, and they went for a weekend on the Big Island. I don't remember what it all was now. But while we were there, we operated in and out of Pearl Harbor. It's not a long run to the dive area. Most of the submarines, you can't dive till you get to a certain depth of water. And Pearl Harbor, of course, and the island of Oahu is the top of an old volcano, several of them. So you go out out of the harbor, and at the last, we called it, the going home signal, because it was the buoy, the last buoy as you went out.
Yeah.
100 feet beyond that, it was 2,000 fathoms straight down, because you're on an island, and it's come up off the bottom of the ocean.
Huh.
And all those islands out there are that way. So you get away from the island much at all, and you're in deep water.
Okay.
And so we operated out there. We could operate on a daily basis, a weekly basis, whatever the operation called for. And we did that. And of course, for me, originally I was qualifying on all the workstations that I was assigned to, and you're assigned a workstation for battle stations, for compartment cleaning, for everything as you report aboard. And me being one of the junior people, why I done all of it. And I mess cooked there, and now in mess cooking, you're at the beck and call of the cook, and you're under his direct orders, and So you do well. And we did, you know, he's trying to keep the crew happy. You keep the crew happy by feeding them.
Yeah, sure.
And so we, now in port, we never, we did not bake in port. We didn't bake breads. We didn't, because you're in and out and around, and you have ready access to baked breads and what have you on the base.
Sure.
But if you're out on patrol, if you go out on patrol and you're going to be gone for any length of time, why then the cooks divvy up the jobs, and you'll have one guy that's, his primary function is baking.
Wow.
So all the bread that you get at night, he bakes it at night, and he bakes enough for the crew for the next day.
Huh.
If he's got time, he'll bake a set of sticky buns for you, so that at 6 o'clock in the morning, or 4 o'clock in the morning, whenever you get up to go on watch, they're ready.
Oh, nice.
And so you get to eat. So, but you know, you don't have to worry about gaining weight on there. Number one, you're young. Number two, you're busy all the time. The only time I ever watched a movie was whenever we were in port, and basically I was qualified, and I had finished all my qualifications, and I didn't, you know, there was nothing broke down or anything. That's the only time I ever got to watch a movie.
Oh, gosh. Was the Blackfin an older submarine? Or?
It was built in 1943, and it had several war patrols on it, but then in the early 70s, it was re-outfitted, and I believe it went to either Brazil or Argentina's Navy.
Oh, okay.
They re-outfitted it and brought everything up to date, and then they gave it to, it was either Brazil or Argentina.
So after Pearl Harbor, what was your next port of call? What did you do after that?
From Pearl Harbor, I went to back to New London, Connecticut, to nuclear power school, the classroom phase of it. And that was 6 months long. And we started in first, right after 4th of July. And we ran until like the 14th of December, and which time then but you know, that's where you learn what a nuclear reactor is, how it's built. Did we do some of the calculations? Yes. All those calculations that we done at that time were done on a slide rule.
Wow. Yeah.
And most people don't even know what a slide rule is anymore. But
wow. My dad had one forever. Between Pearl and going back to Connecticut, did you get some R&R time? Were you able to stop in California to see your family?
I had, when I came back from Hawaii, I had 2 weeks, I think it was, and then I had travel time to go from, they dumped me off in Mare Island.
Oh, yeah.
And then I had to get from there to back down to Los Angeles, and that's where my vehicle was. And so I had a couple of weeks vacation, and then I had driving time to get to Connecticut. And it's 7 days they give you to get to Connecticut. And that's, you know, 7 days you can get to Connecticut easily.
So, was this where you went to a beach party?
Oh yeah. I went to, I got back on Memorial Day weekend, or just before Memorial Day weekend, and my youngest uncle was living with my folks at that time. And so him and I, we got a bunch of kids together and at the local church there and drove them down to a beach party. I don't remember, it was somewhere there around Los Angeles, but we took them down there for a beach party and we stayed. He was 3 years older than me, so, but, well, we were raised together during the Second World War, so, you know.
Close, more like a brother than an uncle, huh?
Yeah, it was like having a big brother. And
So you're scooting by this whole story. I want to hear about who you met at the beach party. Come on.
well, I met a young lady by the name of Beverly Rauch, R-A-U-C-H, and we, for the next couple of weeks, we associated and went on a few dates and what have you, and met her folks and and I made a good impression, I guess, other than the fact that his time was during the Second World War, and his last name, of course, is very much German. But if you told him that he was German, first thing he'd do is say, "Oh no, I'm Pennsylvania Dutch," and but no, it's German. I'm sorry, but me being the nice sort of person I was, I agreed with him. Yep, thank you very much. But no, she was a nice young lady, and I told her I'd write her a letter whenever I got settled in Connecticut, and I did that. And I eventually married her. And we were together for 58 years until she passed.
That's wonderful.
But no, that was, probably should have married her then and taken her with me, but I didn't. That would have caused consternation amongst the parents and what have you.
Oh, yeah.
But
so what did you do?
I did it properly.
Oh, okay.
I think. But at least that's what my future wife, I think she would say that I did it properly.
Oh.
But no, we had a good time, and but I don't.
So you came back out and got married December 30th.
Yeah, when I was transferred in that December, I finished the classroom phase of the nuclear power school, and then I was transferred to. I was being transferred to.
Hartford?
Yeah, it's just above Hartford at the combustion engineering plant there.
Okay.
And they had a reactor plant there that was actually designed for the U.S.S. Tullabee, and which is a little smaller plant than but it was, at that time they were still experimenting with, they had not settled on a final design for the ships, what they wanted to use. And so combustion engineering had their plant, GE had their plant up at Boston Spa in New York. There was another plant a couple other plants out in Idaho that were designed for submarine service, and then the one that was eventually approved and mainly used on the subs now is the I forget who made it. I think it was Westinghouse S5W
Oh, okay.
But it was approved for the majority of the subs that I was around in the early 60s. And
So you were able to,
yeah, we went up and learned how to operate it and what all had to be, you went through, it was a qualification all over again on a new power plant and what it was capable of doing and how to operate it safely so you didn't kill yourself. Yeah, it was it was.
so you and then you were able to come back from Connecticut to California, marry Beverly, and then take her back with you to Connecticut? Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And that, you say, well, you had a 6-month honeymoon. No, you worked at the plant while you're qualifying. You had a mandatory 12-hour day on the plant.
Oof.
And you were on rotating schedules, so you would have 7 days on, 2 days off, 7 days on, 2 days off, and different shifts.
As a newlywed.
And then once you got qualified, once you finished qualifications, then they'd let you work 8 hours a day.
Wow.
Well, I qualified and I got my shift reduced to 8 hours this time, and almost a day later I got orders to the Scorpion. So so it was 12-hour days, and basically, we had time off, and but it wasn't. Most people don't know what working 12 hours a day is like.
Right. Right.
Because you still have to eat and sleep and put gas in the car and everything. So we did all that, and yes, we did have friends there. We associated with, we had dinner with and stuff, and so it was pretty much a normal life if we were on the same shift. If your friend got reassigned to another shift, why no, then you had conflicting schedules, so it was a little less. But no, we and it was there again. You're busy. While we were there, we put it came up an upkeep period for the reactor, and so we were actually down for non-operational for about 3 weeks, and done all the maintenance on it, and it took us about 3 weeks because you have to, you shut down, you cool down the plant. It's not at operating temperature. Then you can go into the compartment and you recalibrate all of the indicating systems for temperature, pressure, and what have you, and make sure that everything in the reactor, because you cannot go in the reactor compartment when it's operational. And so you wind up doing your upkeep, and like I say, 3 weeks. And about that, and you're there again, you're busy little beaver, because all the indicating systems have to be recalibrated, and so that gets to be a bit of a problem. But that was the only place in my career where I received any measurable radiation. And because the training plants like that the maintenance on them is not like they are aboard ship. aboard ship, you maintain that plant as if you had it in your living room, because you don't want any radiation in there. You don't want to have that problem. But the only, if there's a problem with that, the only problem I see with it is that radiation that I received was documented on the general information page of my service jacket.
Okay.
Those service records went to, for the enlisted, went to New Orleans, and somewhere along the line there was a decision made that, well, those are just general comments, they don't need to be included with the individual service record any longer. So they trashed them all.
Oh my gosh.
Either burned them, shredded them, whatever they do with them. So I am a cancer survivor. The Navy has fessed up to the fact that some of the radiations cause cancer in individuals. But I did file a claim with the VA, but there's no way to verify the amount of radiation I had.
Did you wear
So they're gone.
an indicator of some kind when you were on board?
Excuse me?
Did you wear an indicator of some kind?
Oh yes, you have, around any of those plants, you have a film badge, and it's on your belt buckle.
Okay.
And it is developed every 30 days, and if there's any indication at all, that's recorded on in your service jacket. Also, you wear a pocket dosimeter, and that's about the size of your pencil there, and it's worn in your shirt pocket all the time you're aboard. If that has a tendency, that particular measurement device has a tendency, if it's bumped or something, sometimes it will discharge and show that you have received radiation. And you take it to at that time, the corpsman aboard was responsible for maintaining a log on those measurements and stuff. Even on the dosimeter, even though it's just it may be bogus, but basically, where have you been? And aboard ship, you take, you have monitoring devices, handheld monitoring devices, and you go through the ship. You check for alpha, you check for beta, you check for gamma, and you do a radiation survey of the ship, and he does that weekly.
Wow.
That's one of his jobs, because the corpsman, he's your doctor. That's the only doctor you have. If you need your appendix out, he's going to take them out. He's going to be the guy that cuts you open.
Oh gosh.
And because there is no MD aboard, but it's usually a senior enlisted, and he has operating room experience. And
So was it on your belt buckle that you were aware that you had been exposed to?
yeah, that was the best indication if you received any radiation.
Okay.
And like I say, the only place that mine ever showed any kind of positive radiation exposure was at the training facility.
Okay.
When that was all during that upkeep period that we went through, where we went in and recalibrated everything. But no, you got more radiation walking around outside, going to the grocery store, than I got on the Scorpion.
Wow.
No, it was clean. On the Scorpion, I went aboard, and it was new, and so the skipper, the CO, had the ability to say, I'm going to take these people in the reactor compartment. Now, normally he would not do that if the plant was up to operating temperature. It was just a safety precaution, but it was not unusual for him to bring a group of officers or people to the boat, and if we were cooled down, he'd take them down and show them the reactor compartment. And it was clean. We maintained it that way. You could go down in our compartment with just nylon gloves and plastic booties on your shoes. And even after we went through a yard period, myself and another fellow went down there, and we cleaned up all the hot spots, removed all the radiation, and/or painted over it. But see, at that time, you had lead-based paint.
Oh, yeah.
Lead is it's an inhibitor to radiation. So if you clean it as good as you can, and then if you can't get any more off, paint over it.
There you go.
Yeah, that's what you did.
So
And whenever I left the Scorpion, you could still go down in our reactor compartment with just the nylon gloves, no full anti-sea, and the plastic booties.
Wow. So what were some of your ports of call, or where did you go, or what did you do when you were aboard the Scorpion?
Oh, we went on operations. Yes. Can't tell you where I went, but
Okay.
we went there and came back. And the sad part about, you say, well, you're in the Navy, you get to go and visit a lot of places. No, the atomic submarine was not accepted at most ports at that time. The people say, oh no, you're going to radiate us, you'll kill our fish, and you'll radiate our fish, and we'll eat them, and we'll die. And no, it doesn't happen that way. But those were the fears that were around in the public at that time. And now, in later on in the 60s, yes, the boats were allowed to make Mediterranean cruises and stuff, but at the time I was aboard the Scorpion, there was only one port outside the United States that we could stop in, and that was in Holy Loch, England. And while I know where Holy Loch is, we kind of waved at it as we went by. We had, there was a famous old saying, oh, we're headed for Fort Lauderdale for some R&R. I saw Fort Lauderdale one time in 3 years.
Okay.
The rest of the time, that was a non-entity.
So you're on board the ship for like 3-month periods of time.
Yeah, basically, we would, whenever we went on patrol, we had enough food and air supply to last us for, say, 3.5 months, 4 months. And by the time you got to that point, you were down to eating liver and onions, and you knew you were going to be home pretty soon, because that was where you were headed for.
That's all it was like.
And I was in the engine room, and we used seawater to cool our condensers down and stuff. And I can tell you right now that the temperature around Florida is not 38 degrees.
No.
It's more like 72,
Oh.
78.
Wow. Were you ever claustrophobic?
No.
It was never an issue for you. Fit right in.
Yeah, there was only one person that I know of that ever left the boats because he was claustrophobic, and that was on the Blackfin, and he had chronic seasickness, and also I guess he had a little claustrophobic, but I don't know of anybody else that ever said that he was claustrophobic and couldn't be on there. You're very busy. Most of the time you have assigned tasks to do almost daily, and you're on watch. I spent more time on watch, 4 on, 4 off, 4 hours on watch, 4 hours off watch, and then 4 hours later you're back on watch again. I spent a lot of time doing that in the early days.
So what would that entail?
You're monitoring the plant operation, or you're operating the electrical system, or the reactor itself, or monitoring everything is monitored on there on a continuing basis.
So you're literally watching something. You're not like
yes, you're hourly. You're taking readings on the temperatures and pressures and everything. You don't want to be surprised that something's not working properly.
Right. So you were at sea during the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yes, we were. Involvement-wise, I can't tell you what we did.
Oh, okay.
We were there as part of the blockade. That's what surprised me was whenever they brought that Russian missile boat into Havana. What's the difference between having a missile boat there these days, because they have all the capabilities of launching any missile at you.
Wow.
You had a missile crisis last year and nothing was done about it. But
so at this point, you're starting to have a family.
yes,
So
I did have a family. I was in port, thankfully, whenever my son was born. I had just climbed into my uniform and was getting ready to go to the ship, and my wife said it's time to go. So we went through the traffic of Norfolk to the Portsmouth Naval Hospital, and my son was born there.
I'm glad you were there.
And I had him contact the ship and tell them that I was there, and because we didn't have a phone at the time.
Yeah.
And so I had the hospital contact them, and
Good.
of course I had to take a couple of boxes of cigars with me back to the ship.
There you go.
But yeah.
So at this point, what were your goals with the Navy? What were you thinking your next steps were going to be?
Well, after I didn't have, it's not like I had done all my qualifications up to the point of qualifying for engineering officer of the watch. I did not complete that. That was the officers or senior enlisted that would do that. And I requested shore duty, and I wanted to spend a little time with my young family and stuff, and that was declined, and so Mr. Wilson decided that it was time for him to leave the active Navy, and I did that, and you know, it was a shock at first, but okay, life moves on. I did entertain the thought of going back on active duty during the buildup of Vietnam, but I was told that I would have to drop a rank, and I said, I'm not going backwards.
No, I don't blame you.
Thank you very much. So Vietnam has to work without me.
So
but
you came back to California?
I would not have been on the ground over there anyhow. I would have been at the worst on a ship in the area, either supplying the necessary items of war or fuel,
Yeah.
whatever. And
So you came back to California, of course.
excuse me.
You came back to California.
Oh yeah, came back to California. Well, that's where the folks are at.
Right, the grandparents.
And my expectation at that point was that I wasn't sure that I was going to remain in civilian life or whether I was going to go back onto active duty. So I had already had 6 years in, so I joined the local Naval Reserve, and
Nice.
I said if that would be, you know, if I want to go back, at least I've got some place to go.
Right.
And that was the reason I thought about volunteering for Vietnam. But other than that, I was doing training classes and for new people, and also maintaining my own expertise in engineering plants. I done numerous exercises on ships. In the Navy, before a ship deploys, they go through an operational readiness exercise, and this includes various casualty situations and the monitoring of them and the plotting of how you're going to get out of them. And, you know, because if you get a fireboard or a flood, you have to, that's your home. You're going to have to put it out and repair what's done, because that's the only way you're getting home.
Right.
Yeah, that is your home, and you better take good care of it, because those fishies down there, they don't care. They'll eat you. Yeah, but
So what did you do in civilian life after?
oh, I went to work for the General Telephone Company in Pomona area, and I was put in. I installed equipment in the central offices for new equipment, additional equipment as the areas grew. And in the 60s and 70s, Southern California was growing at a rapid pace, so you were busy all the time. There was plenty of work, and I put everything in from basic old dial phones to operator switchboards and stuff, and because, you know, you still had a need for the operators also at that time.
Right.
Most of your long distance communications was handled through the operator at that time still. You were just developing the direct dialing system, and Western Electric had one, and it was good, and the one that GTE put out was a good system also. They both operated very well. But a lot of the, a lot of the companies, if they needed more or less direct communications with a supplier or the larger companies mainly, they would put in what they called WATS service, wide area telephone transmission services. And you could pick up the phone, access the WATS line, and you'd be talking to somebody in Los Angeles.
Wow, okay.
And or access to their dialing system. And we put in those kind of services also.
And all this time you were also doing your commitment to the reserves on the weekend?
Yes, I maintained my commitment to the reserves and done all of that too.
Great.
It's like I had, 2 jobs, and sometimes I was wondering if that was enough, but yeah.
So when did you retire? So how many years in did you have before you retired?
Well, with General Telephone, I retired from there. I was offered a package, retirement package in 1988. And the reason that came about was up to that point, we had installed whatever they bought. A decision was made by upper management to not have us install the equipment, but have the manufacturer in the contract not only build the equipment, but install the equipment.
Oh.
And then the rest of the then our job would be just to
Troubleshoot.
add to it or whatever. And there was no need for my services any longer, so they offered me a package. So in '88 I retired from GTE and paid them a lot of taxes to Uncle, and went out, and I fell back onto my mathematics and went into finance a little bit, and became an enrolled agent for the IRS and worked with them on an independent basis. I was an enrolled agent. I worked at that for another 27, 28 years.
Wow.
And I finally retired after the 2015 tax season was over.
When did you retire from the Navy or reserves?
I retired from the Navy in 1993, and there was 2 reasons for that. One, that was I had cancer, and I was no longer could I pass the physical examination, and also I was coming up on 30 years.
Nice.
So I says, check me out. And I did.
I know, Philip, you have a story about your shirt and always wearing the U.S.S. Scorpion.
Oh yeah,
If you want to share
that's
with
the
us.
shirt that's the sub that I served on for 3 years. She is, the folks there are on eternal patrol. She is at, about 50 miles off the Azores. And the chief of the boat, Wally Bishop, the chief quartermaster, Mizuchi, I sailed with him, and then Chief Smith was my last chief aboard the Scorpion, and they're all three on eternal patrol with the Scorpion. And, some people may not, some people say you died. Well, yes, but in the subservice, we term it as being on eternal patrol. So.
Well, I think that's lovely. And I'm sorry that happened, and grateful that you're safe and you were home and off the ship.
Oh yeah, I'm happy to be home. The Navy, okay, I'm a farm boy from Central California, and did I carry that down to Oxnard? Yes, I worked on the Dos Vientos Ranch up here on the hill.
Oh, yeah.
Whenever it was still an operating ranch. Mr. Camarillo came up to review the property. I suspect I was a worker bee, so I saw him at a distance. It wasn't somebody that I was going to be introduced to, but I did see him at a distance, and I suspect that at that time the property was probably available for sale. The gentleman that owned Dos Vientos when I worked on it was actually, he had a machinery operation in Pennsylvania, Union City, Pennsylvania, and during the Second World War, he built the small tractors that they used for just about anything. They were a tracked type tractor, but they were small, so you could, fairly powerful, but you could do a lot of things with them. And he built those for the Army. And then after the war, he bought, during the war, I guess it was, he bought Dos Vientos Ranch. And, then eventually I wound up in the Navy. And it was good for me.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you that. If you had to put in a sentence what the impact the Navy had on your life or your, even your retirement, what would you say?
It gave me an opportunity to go and be a part of something that was brand new. Did I think that it might work into an actual job that I could take to civilian life with me? Absolutely, because at that in the late 50s, early 60s, you were putting a lot of nuclear power plants in, and they should have continued. You wouldn't be in the situation you're in today had they continued, because you're going to, for example, you had a meltdown at 3 Mile Island in Pennsylvania. I guess it's in Pennsylvania or Delaware. They're putting that plant back online, and it's going to supply power to a data center that is being built there for that purpose. It's only going to supply that data center. That's how much power they need.
Wow.
You don't have time to. They have allowed the grid to become so antiquated that it's a problem. Now it limits you in the power that you can have. The wind power does not operate during extreme cold weather. We found that out in Texas a year or so ago. The solar power, you put all kind of solar power in the desert here in Coachella.
Yeah.
But somehow somebody forgot how they were going to get it all to the grid. So you have a lot of power available there, but some of it can't get on the grid.
Oh.
So we kind of shot ourselves in the foot, didn't we?
Wow, I did not know that. Not aware of that. Well, we thank you for your service, Phil. Is there anything else that we haven't discussed that you want to be sure is told in your story?
Not that I can think of right off the top of my head. There's always incidents on ships and what have
yeah.
you. You know, so yeah, we had a when the ASROC first came out, for the surface ships, it was designed to be a sub-killer. And it was pretty effective, I'll have to tell you. Well, they shot one at us, and it landed on the rear deck and actually collapsed the engine air intake, which is, it's a pipe about 9-10 inches in diameter that feeds air when you're snorkeling to the diesel engine.
Oh.
And yes, it will allow a whole lot of water in a very little time. But, you know, there again, that's the expertise of the submarine sailor. The engineman on watch knew to hit the quick trip on the engine air induction, and that stopped the flooding. And yeah, you're sinking, but you blow all the air out of the tanks, and the next thing you know, you come up. And but it does give you a pause to think that, gee, if that guy hadn't known to do that,
Yeah.
you could have very well not been here today, but no problem.
Fall back on your training.
It's training and expertise. Especially on the old diesel boats, you had a crew on there of about 80 enlisted and 9 officers, something like that. And you're very close-knit because you don't have a whole lot of space, you know, so you don't have any privacy, you know, don't worry about that. You go to sea on that, and the only one that gets a shower is the mess cooks and cook and the corpsman.
Yeah.
The rest of you actually, you get maybe a basin of water every day to wash your socks and shave and what have you. On the old boats you could grow a beard, except for the people that are assigned to the oxygen breathing apparatus for casualty purposes. You have to be clean shaven so that mask will seal around your face and you can do the job.
Right.
On the nuclear ships, there was no, at the time I was in, there was no beards at all. You could have a mustache. But there, you had air breathing masks, and you had air manifolds throughout the ship. And they had either 4 or 5 connections, or some of them would have 8, depending on how many people were in the work area for that particular purpose. And if you had a casualty, you wore air breathing mask, and you went from one manifold to the other. And if, you know, you better, make good sense to call ahead and see if there's a manifold opening before you leave your station here and go there.
Right.
But yes, we had our air breathing system. We had our own oxygen generation. We had our carbon monoxide burning. We had CO2 scrubbers, and we would actually, from an environmental standpoint, the only thing that we were not able to get rid of was the Freon. And that, of course, brought on the development of other types of refrigerants. So, you know, if you look at it from that standpoint, yes, we did help the world out. We brought another, something else in to use as a refrigerant, but other than that, food. You couldn't, you know, you could go fishing if you wanted, but you weren't going to get it inside the boat. So.
Well, we thank you for